All right, guys, the drawer opening. Now I had to make a decision. If I've got a wood that I can match the grains with real well, and I'm doing like a table apron or a corner cabinet or whatever, one of the things I like to do is I take a wider piece and I cut it, I rip it, and I'll cut off whatever I want for my top. In this case, it's 1.25 inches. It's actually a little bigger. Then I rip another piece. You can see it better here. That is the width of my drawer. Then I come back and I chop or cross cut what's going to be the length of my drawer opening out. Then I glue it all back together, just as you see I've done. Now you see this little notch in here? That's where I actually took the piece I chopped out as my drawer front, and I put it in here, slid these together, glued this back together. Now what that does is that gives me a perfect drawer open. And that's what I did here on this piece of poplar. Now my decision is that I don't want the glue seams in this tiger maple. And I hate to waste that center, but I can match up a nice drawer front. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to cut this out. Now to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in the center, in the corner, all four corners. Then I'm going to come back and just take a jigsaw and rough cut this out, leaving the line. Leave it heavy, maybe 1/8 or so. Then I'm going to mount this on top of it, clamp it into place, and using that same spiral cut, that same 1/4 inch spiral cut bit, and using the poplar as the pattern, I'm going to route it out to give me a perfect opening. No glue seams. Now, if this would have been cherry or cherry or walnut or something, I might not have done that. I might have just cut it and taken the center out of it. The piece that came out for the drawer would have been the drawer. Now, if you wanted to do an overlay in this, and the reason that this glue seam is not going to match, and I want to make sure you understand, because this looks pretty good, but this is just a rip and glue it right back together. It's this little shift area. Where I have to shift this piece over is going to take that curl and make it misaligned. It would show. Cherry or straight grain, walnut, red oak, white oak, any of them where you can get a nice, rip, and you don't have a lot of figure running vertically in it as we do in the tiger maple. You can get by doing that, and it really, really looks nice, because then the drawer front came out of the same place, out of the same board, and it's a perfect match. Now in this case, we're going to do an overlay drawer front, and we'll resaw a piece that will fit the drawer, and you'll see that when we get there. If I wanted to do this same operation, to use the same piece of wood to do an overlay drawer, how would I do it? Well, it's actually simple. What I do, watch down very carefully. What I do is I do the same thing. I cut it just like this. I chop my drawer front out. Then I come back, and let's say, for example, I want a 1/4 inch overlay. Then on this center piece right here, I have to take a 1/2 inch off. So I rip a 1/2 inch off this, narrowing the opening by a 1/2 inch, and that's going to give me my 1/4 inch overlay, top and bottom. Then I also have to take these two pieces, slide them in an additional 1/4 inch, so that my drawer front, the piece that came out, is a 1/4 inch. bigger on all sides, or a half total. And then I have the drawer front coming out of the same piece. But again, I emphasize, I would only do that in a wood that I can match the grains real well. If you're doing a table and you've got an overhang on the table coming out, it creates a shadow line. So that ½ inch that you're going to have to take out to get the overlay part, take it out of the top. Because if it doesn't, if when you glue it all back, if it doesn't match perfect, it's the least noticeable because of that shadow line. Okay, I'm going to drill this, and we'll get the router out and get it cut. All right, guys, here's what I've done. I rough cut it out. I mounted my pattern to the back side. I just put a couple screws in it to hold it, making sure I was centered. Now, this spacing in here is right off of the cabinet. It's exactly where we laid out. And the drawer is centered, and this drawer is 16 inches. And it's 3 3/4 top to bottom. That's the opening. So when we do our our front on it, our front's going to be 4 1/4 and 16 1/2 long. 1/4 inch overlay on each side. Now again, I've got this 1/4 inch spiral cut bit. These little bearings are going to be running right on that popper down inside. All right, on this I got a problem. My cut depth on this is not, let me see here, I might be able to get down a little bit more. Just about run out of cut depth on this because this wood is pretty thick. Let's see what we do now. Now, one of the things, normally I would not leave that much material overhang to have to cut, especially with a 1/4 inch bit. But this tiger maple likes to chip. And I've had a lot of emails, guys, asking me about planing this stuff. If you, and one of the questions is about dampening. That definitely helps. But remember what we ran into. Make sure you do both sides. And dampening it a little bit, and then running it through on a skew. And a skew means that, you know, instead of trying to run it through a planer dead on, try to run it through on a little bit of an angle, so that those knives aren't chunking right into that soft curl. Because when we cut this out, even with the drill bit, even with the jigsaw bit back to where it made the least amount of chip, you can see I'm still getting some surface chip. And That's just where that bit's coming up and down. Now, why wouldn't it be surface chip on the bottom? That's because, again, that bit, it's chipping on the top. And if you look carefully, you're going to see it's a chip in almost every one of those little soft grains. That's what chips the easiest. So anyway, we now have a drawer front cut out. So we're going to get back and we're going to be ready. All right, guys, mortise time. And my favorite way of cutting mortises is a dado blade. And I've got my little pattern stick here, and I'm going to set this thing up. That looks pretty good. Now, I hope you figured out by now I don't take a lot of chances. Not on something like this anyway. So what I'm going to do is I've got a little piece of scrap here that I'm just going to check to get my depth or the width of my tenon. I have no idea where I'm at. What I've got is I've got a piece of poplar that's the same thickness as my material and cut to length. I'm going to actually run both tenons on this and go back to my case and double check one more time. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize on this is that you want your miter slide and your blade and all have to be square. All right, I'm just going to go double check this and make sure I'm right on my length. I'll be right back. All right, guys, I got everything set up. Now, I actually had to move that fence a little bit. And again, by taking that piece of poplar and making myself an exact duplicate of what I'm going to be doing, made sure I was right, and I wasn't. It was the difference in one side of the line on the scale and the other side of the line a little bit. So, and that's what, no matter how careful you measure, you know, the thickness of a pencil line and things like that, they make a big difference. You know, one of the things I like to do is I like to mark with a knife. But still, by doing a little mock-up or a test fit or test cut of a scrap to make sure you've got it right, that's just good woodworking. That's smart woodworking. Yeah, somebody will come back and say, yeah, but you know, you waste a lot of wood. Oh, no, you don't. The wood that we use to do our setups and our tests, that's probably some of the most valuable wood we got. Trust me. Okay, here we go. Time to cut them. Well, that worked out pretty neat. Remember we did that 1/4-inch thing where we offset our tenons by a 1/4 inch? Well, I kind of calculated I knew it would be close to a quarter what I was going to have to take off to form the tenon, and it's working out really nice. I may have to go back and nip that bottom. If you're not square in here, that's where it will show up when you do the cross cut. Now you notice I do the cross cut after I've done the flat cut, and the reason for that is that prevents me from getting any chip out back here. Okay, I'm going to run the rest of everything, and we're going to come back and get some glue. All right, guys, we got a tenons cut, and I've done a dry fit. I've got everything fitting, but I want to tell you something. I had to, I'd play with it a little bit. You know, I've watched them shows too and read them books, and I got to tell you, mine don't come out like theirs. I always got to tweak my tenons a little bit, or the mortise or whatever a little bit. What I wound up doing was, I take a little bit off the top of the tenon on a couple. This one up here, it didn't want to set flush, so I had to take a little shoulder plane the tenon a little bit. Now the reason a shoulder plane or rabbiting plane is that it will go right up to the edge, so it doesn't leave a little hump on the side, right at where the tenon meets the shoulder. But we got it all fitted up, and the reason I even mentioned all of that is they don't come out perfect. So you always got to, usually you have to, you know, despite your best efforts, you always got to tweak a little bit. And even though the general term is given to it as woodworking, it's actually more correct to say it's working wood, because that's what you have to do. All right, I'm ready to put this thing, I've dry fitted, I'm ready to glue it up. But I want you to take a look very quickly. You can see the way the cawls come into play, and how the cawl will span the joint and allow us something to clamp it to keep everything straight. Now, the other thing we may have to do, and I've got them here in case I need to, is I may have to take and put a little piece across here and put a clamp right dead in the center of the joint. That pulls everything nice and flat. And on this wide piece, which is the drawer front, I may have to put one here and one here, just to be sure that I've got everything nice and flat. So I'm ready. Let me get this thing apart. I'll start gluing. All right. I just want to get everything well painted. One of the things I do is I always paint these edges. And that helps to seal that end grain. And because, again, I'm using Type Bond 3 here, and the reason is I like it is because it dries hard. We talked about that. I don't want to, I use the yellow glues forever, and they do well. You're not going to hear me take a thing away from them. But I like this a little better, but you have to be fast with it. It tacks up really quick. What I don't want is I don't want enough glue in here to create myself a hydraulic. If I've got a lot of liquid in here, okay, when I go to pushing it together, it's going to it'll create a pressure in there. It tries to push your joint back. But I also don't want to starve the joint. I want to make sure I got plenty. All my surface is well coated. And keep yourself oriented. That's the one I had to plan a little bit. And because I know I'm going to get a little bit of glue squeeze out right here, I'm going to put a little bit of tape on this caul. If I can find the head, there it is. Just to keep from gluing the caul to the face frame. This is a little wider. All right. Now, because I made that mistake on this, I've got a little bit of an issue, so I'm going to have to put my shim down here when I pull this together. See, I want this right down on here. I want this corner coming in right. Nice and tight and flat. And that's what it takes to pull it together. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, just to be sure, I'm going to throw me a little insurance on here. So you can still see there's just a little bit of a dip there, and you can see there's just a little bit of a, this will pull it up and keep everything nice and straight. See, we want to maintain that line straight. You get this clamp out of the way just a little bit. I'm going to come in and do the same thing right here. Actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and get clamps on that bottom first. See, that tight bond 3 is already tacking. And I need to double check. Looks pretty good, to be sure. Grab a couple shims real quick. Actually, I need to change this clamp because I'm not going to be able to get a measurement on this if I don't. And I'm going to line this clamp up as straight as I can. You know, when you're clamping something up, if you got a clamp all twisted, it'll pull you right out of square. All right, I'm tight. But I'm still going to make sure that I'm not dropping. Nice and tight. Before I get too far, I need to make sure this thing is square. That's pretty good. That looks pretty good. That looks good. Now I'm going to do a diagonal. It'll be easier to do it from the front. All right, 41 5/8 both directions, I'm square. Now what could I do if I wasn't square? That's the big deal. Well, you can go corner to corner and move it. In other words, push it whichever way you need to go to get them even. The other thing you can do sometimes is to take your clamp and like have this caul down here, move this one up and rack it. Just as much as a clamp will push it out of square, you can push it in square. And sometimes you may have to, instead of having that clamp coming straight across, you may need to, because if this clamp is up here and this one's down here, what it's going to do is it's going to force this square frame to go like this. It's going to force it to do that. All right, this one's done. I'm going to put some cauls on here just to hold it flat. Make sure everything's locked good in place. And I'll do the other one. And we have a face frame. Okay, our face frames are all glued up. And we've gone through, I went through and I cleaned up all my glue. Any squeeze out in my corners, and I got a nice clean face frame. All put together. Now, here's where I cheat a lot. A lot. Grande. A lot. Most guys will glue a face frame onto a corner cabinet. I don't. That's a mess. It's hard to glue, hard to clamp. You glue inside, it's just a mess. So, I screw them on. Works neat. If you look at this bottom case, you can see what I did. I went in on each shelf and I added a little glue block. On each corner that will be hidden by the face frame. And you can see where I've run some longer ones here and here that will go on either side of the drawer opening in here. I could have probably put one in here if I'd wanted to, but I don't think so. I don't think we need it. Got one all the way across the bottom. Now this just makes life all too easy. The other thing this is going to do is that when we finish it, I simply take all the face frames off, finish them, finish the case, screw it back together, and we're done. Don't have to worry about paint getting on my face frame or dye or whatever for my face frame getting on my paint. Works neat. Now I've already screwed the upper case on. And as you can see, if you even, in order for you to see those glue blocks, you got to really get around and look. And if you want to make them a little fancy, you can. Just make them disappear. They've never seen them. Now one thing I want to tell you about, when you're drilling a hole for a screw, and you'll hear me tell you this all the time, make sure that the screw can pass through the hole freely. The reason for that is that makes it pull tight. Now when you glue these little glue blocks on, I usually try to hold them back about a 30-second or so, just a little bit. That makes sure that when I screw it on, it's going to pull up tight to my carcass. Works neat. Now, the other thing we got is getting inside of here is a little difficult. We got this little small opening here, and we're going to have to be reaching in from the back. Now again, that's why we only screwed this case together temporarily. So we just simply take this off. The other thing that's going to allow us to do is when we get to making the drawer, and remember, what I had you do, we held this shelf down to make a door closure. So we've got a space in behind here. And so we have nothing really for the drawer to run off. But the other reason I did that is I don't want my drawer, where I can help it. Sometimes it's hard to get past. But I really don't want my drawer running across grain. The grain in the shelf is running left to right. The drawer, of course, is going to be running front to back. So what I'll be able to do is just simply attach me across the grain, screwing it down in some larger holes. Remember the expansion and contraction thing, to allow the drawer to run. By removing the top, I'll be able to work that whole drawer from the top down. But we're going to be able to do something else. If you look at a corner cabinet, we're going to have this, we talked about this, we're going to have this drawer running in here. Well, look over here. We've got a big old open hole in there. Nothing happening. I like secret compartments. Oh, I like them a lot. You get the point. But the cool thing is, with the top off, we're able to get in here and work all of that, which would be very difficult with the face frame on. Okay. Installing this face frame, like I said, is just all too easy. Now, I want to mention something to you. If you have issues in your alignment here, you can take a file, a rasp, a little hand plane, and tweak these out. Get them where your face frame is fitting right. Now to make sure I'm right, first thing you want to do is make sure your case is square. But then I cut me a little stick. Nice stick, huh? What this stick does is this makes sure that I align to my sides correctly. In other words, this makes sure I've got the correct overhang on both sides. So that when I put this together and I stand one on top of the other, everything's going to be lining up right. It's just a spacer. And all I'm doing with it is using it to guide this. Now, I see looking, I'm sticking up a little bit on this side over here. Let's see what we got going. Need to shift a little bit. There it goes. Now you can see now where the cauls or the glue blocks give me the ability to work all of this. I think I got a little shelf sticking out here just a little bit. I do, I see it. So I'm going to sand that down just a little bit. Now I'll tell you something else that's happened here. From the first webisode to this one, this has been sitting in the shop. And we've gone from not having any heat to a lot of heat and no humidity in the shop. And I see it right here. I've got a little area right here that this is actually sticking up just a little bit. So that tells me these sides are probably contracted just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to take a sander and I'm going to tune these up and we'll... Now, one thing I want to tell you, if when I'm sanding this, and again, I could do it with a hand plane, and yes, I should have a mask on. It's hard to wear it and talk to you too. If you get this, you can actually take it, just kind of knock the top of this angle down just a little bit, lowering it just a little bit, and that'll allow you to set down a little closer. fit. All right, that's pretty good. I need to take a little bit more off that point on those others. Still a little bit tighter than I like it. And what I'm doing is I'm taking it off here because this needs to kick that way just a little bit. And one of the things that you'll find with a corner cabinet is sometimes you kind of got to listen careful. Remember when we used those cauls and we glued all of this and we were particular to hold this to try to keep it straight? Sometimes the face frame on a corner cabinet can glue up with a little bit of an arc to it, and it'll make you think it doesn't want to fit. So that's why pulling it down and clamping it, don't force it, but when you pull the arc out, it'll lay right down where you want. And that's exactly what we got here. He's laying down good. Check my space. Make sure I'm lined up good. Actually, I need to shift that way just a little bit. All right. Now again, if you wanted to glue this, you can. Not much doubt about that. But it's just all too easy to slap the screws in and get on out of here. Probably should have something under that, but I ain't got to pull that hard, so I'll be okay. All right. It's lined up. A few screws, we're good to go. Face frame. And as you can see, I mean, it pulls in nice and tight, fits good. It's not an issue whatsoever. Now we're ready to head for our moldings and doors and drawers.